Good evening, everybody. System Chalk here with what should be the 75th episode of Book of Hours, our first run through House of Light on YouTube. I say should be because I think I saved my file as 47, and I believe that is a few weeks ago now. So, anyways, apologies if I get the time wrong. Clearly, that is not the most important part of today's work. Now, one small challenge I run into, and this is kind of the same challenge that I have each time I do this, I don't have anything written on my to-do list, and I think it is fair to say that I had a few things underway. So let's just take a quick look here. We are considering... Right, okay, so Coil and Chasm is on its way up. That should be the last of the lessons. We're also trying to make someone happy. Alright, Peter Ecdistis is arriving on the God in the Wood. So I suppose the question here is, who am I inviting to the Salon? It says here, so we've got Fraser for beef. I've got an entry for Wakefield, so I suppose that would probably be the roast potatoes. Schaller gets pickled mushrooms. Daymare gets game chips. And Corso gets orange jumble. And that would probably be, yeah, that looks like that's reflected in the drinks as well. So I suppose, really the question here is, how do we get the invitations written? And it looks like I might already be doing that at one of the desks. So yeah, I think my first aim is going to be to, get that Salon out of the way. And then I think everything else will follow after that. I do know that for a long time I've been trying to get these books read. A little bit like life, actually. But, I don't know. I'm also trying to figure out the skill situation. But I think for the next little bit, let's focus on the Salon while we can. Now, on the Twitch stream, I've actually found a rather good way to quickly go through the incidents. I'm not quite ready to use that in this playthrough yet, because I think there's kind of enough for us to do without meddling with what we can get access to. Oh, that's right, we were going into the Cougar bit as well. But yeah, so I do have a couple of options. I know, for those of you that have been following the Twitch stream, that's been going on since the beta. That's a very, very, very long playthrough. It's actually all I've done, so I've effectively destroyed the Twitch channel off of that. But for good reasons, though. It's a wonderful game. That's not quite the intent for this one here. I think once we get to a decent location, once I have kind of an idea in terms of what I want to do with the Lighthouse Institute, I can definitely start pushing things towards it. And hopefully that will also give people a few ideas for themselves if they're wanting to push towards a particular ending. I think there's a couple of things that we can do to help people achieve that. But for now, let's focus on getting the invitations out. So Schaller, I believe, requires nectar. But Stone Stories ought to cover it. Yeah, there we go. And then it's Daymare and Corso. I'm a little happy that I queued all this up for myself, just so I don't... I saw all these empty elements of the soul, and I was a little worried that I'd be sitting idle trying to figure out what to do. Actually, I shouldn't do that at this desk. I should probably use Natan's. So here we're trying to bring Daymare in. So I'm in a little bit of a... I don't want to say I'm in a bind, but I am going to need to have a think about how I use my Trist. The funny thing for me is that I don't dislike Trist, but it's one that I sort of underrate in terms of overall use. And that's just because it doesn't get me a lot of money at the Sweet Bones. And it's something that, like, I think the moon is one of the more helpful aspects for it, but it doesn't, like, it only gives me one moon. Sorry, I gotta sneeze. Or not. I'm sure that'll happen later on in the broadcast. But yeah, so because it only gives me the one moon, I don't know. I sometimes feel it sometimes feels it's not as helpful as it could be. I think it's usually just because I'm trying to do something with Edicts Martial. But the fact of the matter is, for this playthrough, right, I want to go to Crowcross Sands. I want to make the Catwink. It's actually something that's in fairly high demand. I think it'll be in even more demand if I can open up the Hall of Whispers. But for now, let's just settle with inviting everybody. So Corso, I think he actually needs Lantern, if I'm not mistaken. I've definitely been burned in the past by mistaking people's tastes for the requirements to invite them. Alright, I think we're in good shape though. Now I just need to post it. So we'll send those off first thing in the morning. Better now. Alright. Might as well get the postage. There's not much work on offer in Brandkrug, but I can find 6 pence worth of odd jobs, or add coin to find a visitor seeking employment. I think there was an earlier question, if I recall correctly, in terms of the comments. Somebody asked about the metal that I used at the Sweet Bones in the during Numa. Now, I'll confess, some of these things I have expectations for, right? So it's, I don't really put a whole lot of thought into the sun coming up in the morning. It will obviously be a catastrophe if it doesn't, but I don't, it's not the sort of thing that I dwell on. So it's a little bit like, using certain elements of the soul. I always just sort of expect to get them back one way or another, even if that means that they might be afflicted. So while I can't point to a specific moment, I'm sure somewhere in the video there might be something visible, but basically through largely accident, I think, I did learn that metal, to all appearances at least, does not have an affliction. So, your core, Arab, Fet, Health, Fost, Shapt, Trist, and Wist, those can all be affected by either the wrong type of book, or if you use it for the labors during Numa. But it seems that metal is kind of immune to that for one reason or another. I mean, it does. I suppose there's a couple of ideas in terms of what metal is that might make it the more sturdy one. Your mileage may vary. But essentially here, that's the reason why I used it. It was just a nice way for me to get a gold spintria without having to worry too much about the consequences of an affliction. Now, some people do like to have at least one afflicted element of the soul, because afflicted elements of the soul don't wind up fatigued like this. So while you can't necessarily do interactions with other people inside the village, there is a limit in terms of some of the things that you can do. Things like crafting are something that you're able to handle. I also think cataloging books and even reading books, I think, although the game was later changed, that I believe if you have an afflicted element of the soul, you can potentially pass that on to the book. So it became a little bit less of an ideal. I don't normally like, I mean, if I have it, I'll use it, but I don't quite like the idea. It's a little bit like in Cultist Simulator, some people like to have a point of decrepitude because it's an easy way to get access to fear. And obviously you can use the game's mechanics however you like, but because to me I do lean a little bit more on the role-playing side of things. While I don't kind of come up with an elaborate backstory, I do kind of like to think of things that my character would or wouldn't do, and sometimes the changes that they make in terms of what they would accept and what they wouldn't can be these nice little signals of change. For me, I tend not to be the sort of person who wants to go out and actively harm my character because it makes the mechanics a little bit more simple. Obviously, that's an individual choice that people have. I'm not necessarily trying to advocate one way or another, but to me it's just something that doesn't really harmonize as well with the ideas that I have while I'm playing the game. So anyways, long story short, I used the metal in the Sweet Bones because I wouldn't need to fuss with getting the element of the soul back, which is one of those things that I would be looking to use during the Salon. I also have a feeling that there may actually be fewer interactions in the Salon than I originally appreciated, and this is just because I'm hitting the end of certain encounters in my Twitch playthrough, so I might change up the invitation list in a little bit. Okay. This text is useful, thank you, but now that I'm back at Bragkrug, I've realized the oddest thing. The work that's coming out of this place, it's very like the work that Thyrza Blake used to do. I'm sure you know she was librarian here before you. Perhaps a coincidence, perhaps not. The Affair of the God in the Wood, the Lytirian, a faddish health camp in the Black Forest has attracted attention after many of its clients have developed sudden, sometimes upsetting artistic abilities. So we had Eason Fekri. Eason noted the resemblance between the operations of the Lytirian and the work of Thyrza Blake, 7th librarian of the house, and Agdistis, Mr. Agdistis, resolved to experiment with honey. Alright, so we've got Eason's card here. If I need an occult scrap, I can actually add him. I'm actually trying to think of a reason why I wouldn't get the occult scrap, because we've obviously handled we've handled Numa, so we might as well add that to the pile for what you might call an occult correspondence. I'm actually also trying to remember, I think the only language I need is Deep Mandaic, so we don't need to bring him back for language lessons, I don't think. And I think the Confounding Parable we can take overnight because of the rose. Okay, so tomorrow in game, of course. Tomorrow's plan will be send out the invitations, get ready for the Salon, and then from there we'll maybe make some. Well, probably what I'll be doing is digesting all of the lessons, but I think maybe from there we'll have a think about the best way to. I'll just put this on the table if I can. As I used to say in my youth, the day is done and so am I, but I've earned my pay. So yeah, we'll see how much time we have left after the Salon. But I think my big aim would be to try and whittle down some of these texts here. And I do need to consider, you know, I've got the few scene texts and such, so there's probably more than one that I can... there's probably more than one... Or sorry, I can probably get more than these in terms of somewhat easy access. Alright, let's send out the mail. Actually, while we're at it, let's also use the health to earn a bit of money. There's not much work on offer in Bragkrug, but I can find 6 pence worth of odd jobs. Alright, a foggy day, so that normally would be something I want to take advantage of. I think what I'll try and do is maybe make a Wormwood Dream out of that. It's a little inconvenient that it's happening now, but we should be able to restore the tryst in time. So let's keep sending out the invitations. And while I'm at it, we can go to the Nocturnary. So we'll add the Tryst, the Edicts Martial, and the Fog. So that brings us up to 9. So one option I would have would just be to find, you know, any of the various items inside here, but the smarter move for me to do at this point would actually be to go to the desk. So I think the reading room desk, actually Ava's desk would work as well, but we'll take the Tryst, we'll take the Edicts Martial. Now one drawback, right, and then we need the Lunar Globe. And as a comment pointed out, it's the Earth, but silvered like the moon, unlabeled and pocked with craters. Recall a forgotten crime of moon and winter. Edicts Martial with scholar-level moon plus memory creates Wormwood Dream. So the idea here is this is going to take 90 seconds, so that is actually longer than it takes for the guests to arrive. But what I'll try and do here is I'll restore the tryst once it becomes available. And the hope here is that the 2 trysts that I have will kind of act as that bridge, so that if I do really need the 3 tryst, I can realistically have it back from the Sweet Bones in time. Okay. And it may not work out. Obviously, you can never really guarantee what the requests at the Salon are going to be, but this seems to be, to me at least, this seems to be a reasonable approach to get the most out of the Salon. Okay. Just wanted to take a second here. So yeah, we've got Hobson's Choice. I believe we still have the Royal Endeavour, which we haven't followed up on because of Hokabald. An interesting implication here as well is, I believe because Schaller is interested in Hart, he may actually be somebody we could talk to about the affair of the God in the Wood. However, that would also mean that he isn't able to come back, or like we wouldn't be able to have him at the Salon. You have to pick one or the other. We could, of course, invite him back to talk about the God in the Wood, but I think he'll show up on his own. So, right, as I used to say in my youth, the day is done and so am I, but I've earned my pay. Now, normally I would want to restore the health at this point. I'm not going to do that for the simple reason that we have 33 seconds before I can use the tryst, and I do want that tryst restored as early as I can. So we're going to keep the Sweet Bones open. Okay, Strathcoin is here. Wakefield's arrived. Stanislav's here. Daymare. Alright, some familiar faces. So we're not quite at midday yet. In this case, that's not a hardship. Obviously, the delay is helpful for getting my Wormwood Dream. Let us hope it's equally possible to forget this again. So this will be kind of nice to have for those other winter tasks. Alternatively, if I need... So there's a few things that this helps with, right? Very powerful winter, very powerful moon. And so if I need, I can also apply them towards some of the higher level books, provided, of course, that they're winter and moon books. So normally what I've wanted to use them for would be various rooms of the house, but in the case of the Wormwood Dream, it's actually also helpful for certain books. Okay, so as promised, we're going to try and restore the tryst in time. Tuppence will buy me a hearty meal and a quiet place where I can rest and gather my thoughts. It is winter, and the storms have tightened the seas. I am sitting before the fire in the Sweet Bones with a beef and potato pasty in one hand and a hot ale posset in the other. I will still try and restore the health when the time comes, but we'll worry about that a little bit later. And of course, once midday arrives, we will get the Salon going. I am kind of hoping that we get new text, but I think regardless of how the Salon turns out this time around, I'll probably change up the guest list a little bit. If nothing else, that'll motivate me to get a few more elements of the soul. Okay. So, we are hosting Mr. Fraser Strathcoin, philanthropist, collector, former librarian, a complicated man but not a cruel one. Mr. Zachary Wakefield, marksman, detective, renegade. He has always been a quiet man, but since he left the Suppression Bureau, he has grown even quieter and terribly still, except for his fingers and for his eyes, always in restless motion. Father Stanislav John Schaller, priest, diplomat, gardener, a soft-voiced man with a very steady gaze. Daymare, Grafin Frederica Dagmar Sophia Teresa Helena Begina von Nagelsberg, if you prefer. She doesn't. And Senior Corso Reverte, manuscript hunter, legacy scavenger, mercenary. Many would question his ethics, few would deny his acuteness. They will be enjoying pickled mushrooms, you'll learn to like them. Roast potatoes, you really need rosemary for roast potatoes, but fortunately the kitchen garden at Hush House has never been short of rosemary. Game chips. Long before fish and chips, these went crunchily with game. Ideally, you'd want bread sauce and bread crumbs to complete the ensemble, but honestly, it's hard enough not to just stuff these directly into your mouth. Roast beef. Our fathers of old were robust, stout, and strong, and kept open house with good cheer all day long, which made their plump tenants rejoice in this song. Oh, the roast beef of old England, and old English roast beef. Henry Fielding, the Grub Street Opera, and our famous orange jumble. They should be the size of teacup rims and should curl their crisp edges, faintly pink as the underneath of a young mushroom. Lady Jekyll, Kitchen Essays. And they will be enjoying the Isle Water from Brankrug's Deep Springs, Cater and Hero Second Flush Assam, tea from the land of the real unicorn, imported by Cater and Hero. Domaine Reveline. The Revelines abandoned their lands, and yet someone is still making this wine. And Lambic Broslende, distilled from apples in the oldest forest of the western continent. Bring light back to the mirrors where once Lady Ava held court. My guests take their places for lunch. Lunch and supper last longer than less formal salons, allowing you extra interaction between your guests. Wistful asides, instinct and emotion, so starting with a tryst right out the gate. Fraser and Stanislav discuss the unnumbered stones of Brittany, not far from Stanislav's current digs. Fraser insists that they were placed by the Carapace Cross. Stanislav humors him. Actually, I think we'd been putting some effort into stone stories, so that's not bad. We've got our tryst back, which is nice. I don't normally like interrupting the salons, but in this case, I do want to try and do a little bit more with the day. Conversation ebbs and flows. Say something witty. Conversation dwelt on orchids and narcotics. So this is an indicator that the conversation options for at least one of the people who uses Shapt has been exhausted. Another something witty. I imagine we'll get another, the conversation dwelt on. Yeah, the conversation dwelt on pentiments and precursors. So that I should consider a free lesson, seeing as we've already committed pentiments and precursors. Another Shapt card. Okay, so I don't think I'm going to have any options here. I know this always takes me a minute to work out, but let me just bring up my... Okay, so Shapt is something... Yeah, so it's Nyctodromy and Scolacosophy. Now, I seem to remember I actually wrote down a few options for Scolacosophy, so let's just see... So I'd want a level 3, which is already a bit of a challenge. Now, I imagine Coil and Chasm... Well, Coil and Chasm's already at level 2, so that's a non-starter. Ragged Crossroads. Okay, maybe. Well, actually, here's the better question. Why not? What do I think I'm going to do with Ragged Crossroads that... Okay, at the threshold. Every regret is a threshold, and every threshold can be crossed in both directions. A Scholacosophist knows that no threshold need remain inviolate. Obviously, I'm trying to get past my tendency to be rather tight-fisted with the commitments, so... We became even more witty following the dark arts. And more Path and Pilgrim, alright. Conversation ebbs and flows. Spice up the conversation. Add an Arab card. Trying to remember, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we've got 2 more. So I guess any of these could be a potential candidate. I've got an eye here on Coil and Chasm. So actually there's an argument for that to go up to level 4 now, although we only have the level 3 with pentiments and precursors. But I'm trying to think, if we're potentially leveling up Coil and Chasm, if I can get myself some Scale and Nectar before the day is done. But again, it depends on how the encounters go. Actually, I guess I only need 1 more element of the soul. Anyways, I'm going to do my best with what we've got. The conversation dwelt on Ramsund. Okay, so yeah, we really don't have any... Well, we have the one encounter with... we have the one encounter to show for it, but largely a more general conversation. And here, okay, another Arab. So that should be the end of it. Let me just double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, so this will be number 6. So I think, I mean, the other argument here would be to say, well, you know, you're putting so much effort on Coil and Chasm, but it's not the only thing that's got Scale and Grail. But yeah, I think I am going to put the points towards Coil and Chasm. So with that in mind, I'll leave aside a health because that needs to go into... that's going to be what I level the skill up with. If we get an impulse, that will get us the... Oh, here's the fear. I can't remember where we did this. Exorcism for girls. Maybe use the Faust. This just gives me sort of a nice little protection of any surprises during the Salon. So the fear gets me a Scale, and then this should be an impulse. Yeah. So let's do the most sorrowful end of Lady Nona. So there is also a small argument that we can go even further, right? We do have other lessons that we're getting. So Ramsund, for instance, gives me Scale and Moth, and we do have a confounding parable. So if I want, I can turn that into something else as well. Actually, yeah, let's take a minute and see... There's a couple things I'm going to work out here. So first of all, I'm going to make a note here for Skolakosophy. Sorry, I've got a slightly new setup for the stream, and I think I keep bumping the microphone. I'm hoping that's not too tedious. So what I'm trying to do here, my Skolakosophy, I've been keeping a note here, so I have Ragged Crossroads, which is now committed to the Tree of Wisdoms. So I'm going to erase that off the list of potential languages. But it's also going to be one now where I actually say, okay, the floor for all of the skills related to Skolakosophy can now go up to level 4. And the nice thing about that is that opens up more possibilities with the various books that I read. So Coil and Chasm, Lockworks and Clockworks, Serpents and Venoms, Solutions and Separations, all of these are ones that I'm considering, or at least have previously written down for potential Skolakosophy candidates. Preservation would be another example of that. So Edicts Inviolable, Quenchings and Quellings, a couple like those. That should be 3 to 7. Hushery, Ithistry, Nyctodromy, and Illumination are also similar situations. So what I really want to do here is, where I can, either I want to find a skill like Edicts Martial, where I just want to push that as high as I can. Now, unfortunately, some of the candidates here, like Ramsund doesn't work well with Edicts Martial. Path and Pilgrim, I don't think I've committed to the Tree of Wisdoms yet. So the drawback here is it's all well and good for me to sort of say, okay, I'm going to commit this stuff to, or I'm going to really push some of these ahead. But I do still have to make that choice. Like, which of these am I going to start pushing up to the highest levels? And which of these do I want to start bringing up the floor for? So something like Coil and Chasm is really easy because of the pentiments and precursors. But when it comes to Ramsund, do I want to, take something like, say, glass blowing and vessel crafting, Watchman's Paradoxes? Are these the sorts of things that I want to start raising the level for, and trying to get some of those higher level results? Another good example of this actually would be Bells and Braziers. So either do I want to raise the floor, or do I want to start pushing out some of the high level ones? And I don't actually have, I'll confess, I don't have a good argument one way or the other for some of these. It kind of depends on the circumstances. But Bells and Braziers is actually an interesting candidate for the Ramsund. Transformations and Liberations, if I recall correctly, is also a useful one. And I think I am going to keep pursuing Stone Stories. So suppose I wanted to use... Okay, so here's what I'm thinking. Under Moth, really it's Inks of Revelation, which... it would be one that I'd put at level 5 for Ithistry. But let's say that I want to push Bells and Braziers up now. I definitely don't... Well, yeah. This is a hard one, right? Because Transformations and Liberations potentially, if I remember... Oh God, I'm trying to remember which one gets me Orpiment Exultant. Might be Transformations and Liberations. Yeah, so I want the higher... I think I'm going to go for Bells and Braziers anyway. So for that, let's say we leave aside the metal. Yeah, so really I just need 3 memories, and then I've got all the various storms, and... Actually, I've quite a few different works I can go with that. So let's do Instruments of the Heart. So that's 2. And patterns ought to do the trick. It'd be better if I used a core, though. Okay, so technically I have 3 more elements of the soul to work with. Well, no, hang on, because I'm also going to have to commit these. I'm actually probably already going to lose an element of the soul overnight. Okay. So yeah, we'll let the rest run out, and then... I also am neglecting the fact that I'll have the Satisfaction, although I might just take that overnight. My guests leave happy. You've gained an additional potent memory. So yeah, pretty good argument here for more variety in terms of the guests. So the Ramsund we're going to be using before the end of today. These ones, on the other hand, we're going to leave aside. Okay. The other thing I'm kind of happy about is that we are actually getting a couple of these knocked down before the end of the day. Oh, sorry, yeah, because that'll just free up more elements of the soul for book reading. So there's not much work on offer in Brandkrug, but I can find 6 pence worth of odd jobs. With the Fete, we can go for a walk on the moor. I'm going to be a little careful of the timing, but I think we can get away with it. I hope we can get away with it. Put a meter there. And I'm kind of committing everything on this, but we'll also go to Crowcross Sands. And I mean, if it turns out I overreached, you know, that's a shame, but we'll get over it. Okay, I realize I'm at the end of the session here, but let's collect the lessons. We'll start. Yeah, I think I'm actually going to lose one element of the soul overnight. Because we're not starting the... It's 30 seconds to put one of those in the... to level one of those up. So what I'll do here is I'll use the Ramsons to level up Bells and Braziers first, because that's the tougher one. And then I'll level up the Coil and Chasm. Alright, the Instruments of the Heart. Sister Isabel, then precentress of the Abbey Church of St. Brendan's, engages in dialogues with a heart-long of a kind called Dwendrazon that has taken partial possession of her body. The Dwendrazon, like all its kind, usually dwells in the Mansus, but can enter the physical world by manifesting as music and take possession of a willing or semi-willing mortal who hears and loves that music, like Isabella. Isabella records her dreams of the High Mansus, where she is accorded the Dwendrazon status and titles. In return, the Dwendrazon enjoys what it calls a Seizura, a welcome oblivion. Our mostly blessing is that we may never cease, except in Seizure. There is something more that Isabella refers to as the Seizura Magna, but she laments that her Dwendrazon will not tell her exactly what that might be. And I do apologize for being a little bit... for sort of reversing myself on this, but it does actually occur to me it's going to take me a little while to read these 4 remaining texts. So I'm actually going to leave that for Wednesday's episode. We'll read the texts, we will commit the lessons, and then we can... we'll take care... So Path and Pilgrim, Horns and Ivories, Orchids and Narcotics, and Stone Stories will be the 4 that we need to deal with before we start reading books. But after that, we can start making some choices in terms of what we want to level up, especially now that Skolakosophy has a couple of candidates which should be at level 4 through 7. Of course, all of that will be happening in a future episode. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.